Paul Skeens, my mom is single, bro. I need you.
Wow.
Now, why on earth would a child say this? Paul Skeens was just the best college pitcher in the United States. By far. He showed the power one arm could have to lead a team to a championship, which he did wonderfully. Skeens was considered maybe the best pitching prospect in MLB Draft history. Well, that is, the best in MLB Draft history since Steven Strasburg. The rise of Steven Strasburg was a phenomenon unlike any other. The perfect storm of the right guy at the right time for a new team in a market that hadn't seen postseason baseball in over 75 years. Steven Strasburg and the Washington Nationals made history that I'll tell you all about right after a quick word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports. In Underdog's Pick'em game, you make simple predictions on stats, answering the question, higher or lower. These include strikeouts, hits, home runs, and more. Pick 2 to 5 players, get all your picks right, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. I remember there was one year that I was playing fantasy baseball the old school way, and I had a team with Bryce Harper, Jacob deGrom, Max Muncy, Christian Yelich, Brandon Crawford. This team won like 3 games, by the way, the whole season. So I obviously hated my life and my fantasy baseball life at this time. The Underdog Pick'em system is a really good alternative to that. Underdog's Pick'ems are available in 30 US states, so make sure yours is eligible to participate in their contests. Be sure to sign up with promo code SRS, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Again, that's UnderdogFantasy.com or Underdog Fantasy in the App Store. Sign up with promo code SRS and get your initial deposit doubled up to $100. Thank you very much to Underdog for sponsoring this video. Please play responsibly. When Steven Strasburg showed up at San Diego State in the fall of 2006, his strength and conditioning coach nicknamed him Slothberg. He was not taken seriously as a college baseball pitcher at all, because everyone thought he was fat and lazy. Under 2 years later, he was pitching for the United States in the Olympics as amateur baseball's best pitcher. By the time he was eligible to get drafted to play professional baseball, he was easily the highest rated prospect on every team's board. But the team who got to draft him first was the Washington Nationals. The Nationals came over from Montreal, Canada in 2005. The Washington, D.C. area had seen a lot of losing baseball in the 20th century, and the 21st century Nationals joined in on the losing shortly after reviving pro baseball in the city. Such losing had some upside, as it put them in position to draft Strasburg, and then sign him to a record-breaking draft deal just 1 minute and 7 seconds before the deadline to sign him was going to hit. He made it clear right from day one of his minor league baseball career that he did not belong in minor league baseball. Strasburg was drafted first overall on June 9th, 2009. He was up in the big leagues pitching for the Nationals by June 8th, 2010. He was like a regular college student, a little over a year before being the most anticipated young pitcher of his era. And he did not disappoint once he arrived.
Strasburg into the windup. Here's the pitch. Swing and a miss. He struck him out with another breaking ball. That may be all for the night.
He set the Nationals record for most strikeouts in a game in his very first big league outing, and he did it with no walks. It's considered the best pitching debut baseball has quite possibly ever seen. He had it all: blazing fastball, good control, tenacity, a great curveball, all that stuff you'd want to be a good pitcher. He had it at 21 years old, and it carried on through his first 12 big league starts. 12 sounds like a really specific number here, and it is, because during his 12th start, Strasburg tore his ulnar collateral ligament in his throwing elbow. This was bad. It's bad for practically every pitcher except Masahiro Tanaka. Injuries happen to athletes. More often than not, it's a sad story. For some, it ends their careers. Strasburg spent over a full year recovering from the Tommy John surgery he needed to repair his elbow, missing from the end of August of 2010 to early September of 2011. He made 5 starts down the stretch in 2011, only throwing 24 innings in those starts. And he was still really good. It's not like he was averaging under 5 innings per start because he was bad. It's because Washington was committed to protecting their star. They were fully aware of the talent Strasburg was and how fortunate they were to have him. They were not going to take any chances of costing themselves their future over being reckless with his arm. To the Nationals' credit, they knew he was the biggest difference maker they had in their odds of one day winning a World Series. So going into the 2012 season, they set a hard limit on how many innings Strasburg could throw in the season. The number was never publicly revealed, but it was estimated to be somewhere between 160 and 180. Here's the thing though, that was going to include the playoffs, which meant that realistically, if all went well, Strasburg was probably not going to be there if Washington made the playoffs. Not as crazy as it sounds with the young pieces like him progressively getting better and better. Strasburg opened the 2012 season on fire, winning the National League Pitcher of the Month for April, and justifiably so. He was the first pitcher in 2012 to reach 100 strikeouts. He made his first All-Star team, where he got Josh Hamilton to ground into a double play. Man, remember Josh Hamilton? The Nationals were flying high, absolutely on pace to make the playoffs. For the first time in team history, mind you, not counting the Expos stuff, which they abandoned. They finished the season with 98 wins and won the NL East, cementing the new highs of the team. But what also had new highs was Strasburg's innings count. In early September, Strasburg peaked at 159 1/3 innings pitched. The decision was made on September 8th that he would be completely shut down. His season was over, no matter what. Now, it was definitely a move never done before, at least to the memory of most if not all baseball fans. A team actively deciding their unquestioned best pitcher, arguably their best overall player, was not going to be a part of their playoff push. And almost nobody agreed with it in the baseball fan world. It was a huge topic of conversation, definitely the biggest story in the sport among baseball nerds.
Sometimes it just doesn't work out, okay? She obviously dumped him for a reason.
The Nationals brass stuck to their guns though and defended the decision, despite basically the entire baseball world thinking it was ridiculous. And when they lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Cardinals in devastating fashion, the scrutiny continued.
It's over. It's over! Another season down the drain.
Intentionally leaving your best arm off your playoff roster and then losing is a risk people are going to easily say backfired. I'll paraphrase the Nationals' response on the criticism they received through this wise quote from Livy Dunn.
Some people are real bozos.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, I want to compare this to 2 other instances of pitcher protection being a hot topic. Introducing the Jabba rules. These were a set of procedures the New York Yankees put in place on their top pitching prospect, Jabba Chamberlain, once he entered the big leagues in 2007. He was banned from pitching on consecutive days for any reason, and for every inning he pitched, he was mandated a full day of rest. This was meant to conserve his arm down the stretch, and in the regular season, oh my god, it worked. ERA Plus is a stat that takes every pitcher's run-preventing ability and puts it on a scale where 100 is always average. In 24 relief innings for the Yankees in 2007, Jabba's was 1,221, but in the postseason, all that was undone by a bunch of bugs flying in his face. No, seriously. We also have a video on that. The next year, the Yankees said there would be no formal restrictions on Jabba, as they would gradually try to stretch him out into a starting pitcher. He was good again, until he hurt his rotator cuff that season. His career would last for 10 big league seasons, but he never saw consistent long-term success. Meanwhile, 3 years after the Strasburg shutdown, the New York Mets had an ace of their own coming back from injury. One who their fans adamantly shouted was better than Strasburg back in 2013.
You hearing this chant right now? It's Harvey's better. Pretty creative.
I want to know how they came up with that.
Matt Harvey was a star, and when the 2015 Mets were closing in on a playoff push, there was speculation that the Mets could do to Harvey what the Nationals did to Strasburg. After all, Harvey was in just his first full MLB season, and the first one back from Tommy John surgery. The parallels were there, but no, he'd pitch through the playoffs and dominate through long, gutsy outings. But that was it. Too many injuries to count stacked up after his playoff push. To say he was never the same would be underselling it. He never even sniffed his early career potential again. This was exactly what the Nationals were afraid was going to happen to Steven Strasburg. In a way, the decision to shut him down made sense for him, even if it robbed him of pitching in the playoffs that season, and severely hurt the chances of the 2012 Nationals winning a championship. But history to that point showed even being preventative of a pitcher's workload wasn't a sure thing. It could not have been an easy decision for the Nationals to do this. But they had to have felt a lot better when he took the mound for the first time in 2013. In the 7 seasons from 2013 to 2019, Strasburg was really good and really dependable in all of them. His ERA plus was at least 14% above average in every season. He made at least 22 starts in every season, and pitched a minimum of 130 innings in all those seasons. I mean, he earned a $175 million contract extension for a reason. Through the remainder of his 20s, he was one of the best pitchers in the National League, making 2 more All-Star teams and earning 2 top 5 Cy Young Award finishes. But what wasn't there yet was the Nationals' deep postseason run. In 2012, 2014, 2016, and 2017, the Nationals made the playoffs and failed to win a single playoff series. Strasburg was very good whenever he had the chance to take the mound in the postseason, and that carried on through the Nationals' miracle run in 2019. So I think it's only fitting that I, a Mets fan who saw one of his favorite Mets teams of all time lose out on a playoff spot to Strasburg's Nationals, recuse myself from any further discussion on the 2019 Nationals. I don't know, man. What do you want me to say? Instead, I brought on a friend of mine with a really good YouTube channel that also happens to be a Nationals fan to show you what happened when Strasburg was given a chance to be fully cut loose in a long postseason run. Please welcome Jackson from J&D Productions.
I have to say, as a DC fan, that 2019 Nationals run was one of the most exciting sports periods of my life, and it truly just came out of nowhere. Before that season, Bryce Harper had left for the Phillies, and it left the Nats in this really weird place, and then they were bad to start the year. They were 19-31, and they were a mess, and pitching was really the biggest problem. The bullpen was bad, and the back of their rotation was struggling, but what was still good at the time and ended up being the key to that team was the big starting 3: Steven Strasburg, Max Scherzer, and Patrick Corbin. And Corbin was signed that offseason before, essentially with that money that they saved on Harper leaving. All 3 were great, and Strasburg was the best. He won 18 games, he pitched 109 innings, both of which were team highs and are his career bests. He was fantastic, and he had plenty of good regular seasons before, though. The knock on him was the previous postseason disappointments and the famous 2012 shutdown. So for him to actually rewrite the narrative of his career, he had a win in October, and the Nationals gave him that chance when they made the postseason at 93-69. That left them in the wild card against the Brewers. 1 game and you're out, and it was all hands on deck. Scherzer got the start and gave up 3 before Strasburg came in the 6th, and he was just nails. And he was that entire postseason. In that wild card, he struck out 4, only gave up 2 hits, down 3-1. It really looked like it was over for the Nats until a Juan Soto rip scored 3, and that was that, and Strasburg got the win. This Nats team that had just shockingly come back during the regular season to make the playoffs had now shockingly won in the wild card, and they were far from done, but it wasn't going to be easy. They had to face off against the heavy-hitting Dodgers in the NLDS, and after trailing twice in the series, they ended up winning in Game 5 after a Howie Kendrick grand slam in extras. Steven Strasburg was probably the most important Nat in that series. He pitched twice, a Game 2 win, and started in Game 5. Moving on, the NLCS was pretty forgettable. The Nats swept the Cardinals pretty fast. The single game Strasburg did pitch, he went 7, and he got the win. And then the World Series. Going into that series, it felt like Garrett Cole was on such another level that nobody could even touch the Astros. And then Strasburg took over the headlines instead. He got the win in Game 2 to push the series to 2-0, and then he pitched in Game 6 after Washington had lost 3 straight games to go down 3-2. In 14 1/3 innings in the World Series, he only gave up 4 runs and he struck out 14. He was such a big piece of that puzzle, and it felt like no matter what, the Nationals wouldn't stop. They even trailed in Game 7 as late as the 7th. There was some magic about that team, and not only did they go on to win it all, but then Steven Strasburg was the World Series MVP, and it was well deserved. Now, I know, this second Strasburg contract looks bad, but especially for me, it's hard to be too upset. Strasburg deserved it after his success that year, and after all, he brought a championship to DC. It's easy to look back now and see how the contract was bad and it was wrong, but Steven Strasburg helped Washington win their first World Series, and he gave me a run I'll never forget for the rest of my life. And even if he never pitches again, it doesn't matter. He's a Nats legend.
The craziest part of the 2012 Steven Strasburg shutdown is that it pretty much worked. They were right. Strasburg was preserved, and when he was able to let it all loose, the Nationals won the World Series on his back. He was the hero, and was rewarded as such. After the 2019 World Series, Strasburg and the Nationals agreed to a new 7-year, $245 million contract. But I don't think anyone foresaw that ever since then, there would be basically nothing to talk about. Strasburg pitched 36 1/3 innings in the month of postseason play for the 2019 Nationals. From 2020 to the present, Strasburg has pitched in just 31 1/3 innings. Nerve issues came to light in 2020, something that has gotten so severe by 2023 that the hope of him stepping on the mound this season is non-existent. He also developed thoracic outlet syndrome in his throwing shoulder, the same degenerative injury that crippled Matt Harvey's career after the Mets elected not to shut him down in 2015. A really sad and cruel twist of fate. The foreshadowing was there for Strasburg and for other pitchers that injuries could very well ruin his career. In the 4 seasons that have been played since Strasburg and the Nationals took home a World Series, Strasburg has made just 8 starts. That's it. And he hasn't been very good in those 8 starts. It begs the question, was the World Series worth it if, for any reason, the added workload caused him harm? Did the fear they have in 2012 come to fruition in 2019? We'll never know. And honestly, I would guess no one involved cares. They did it. They won their championship. And Strasburg's demeanor and handling of his injuries have been praised non-stop since his career took a nosedive after that World Series. In a weird way, he almost went out on top. Bear with me on this, but I have a crazy analogy to make on this one. You ever watch the Justice League Unlimited TV show?
What? You gonna wash your hands? No, 'cause I'm evil.
Probably didn't expect to have this dropped here, but I do have a proud nerd side that comes out once in a while. Anyways, I'll get to the point. In the final episode of the show, Superman gives a speech before giving Darkseid the biggest beatdown of his life.
What we have here is a rare opportunity for me to cut loose and show you just how powerful I really am.
And then the show ended forever. That is basically what Steven Strasburg did in the 2019 World Series. Cut himself loose, show everyone how good he was, and then that was it. And doing it against the most powerful villain of their generation. It's unbelievable to me how much similarity I see in that. Whether or not the shutdown worked shouldn't be up for debate. They did it to protect his health and their shot at a World Series in the future. They achieved that World Series, with him being one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. Strasburg may or may not have paid one of the biggest prices his career could have paid since then, but I would imagine he wouldn't change a thing. If I'm wrong, so be it. And looking at that controversial story from 2012 through today's lens, I can't help but think the Nats got the last laugh.